We'll allow more time.
I call Chris Farfoy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's always a pleasure to follow Mr. Okunvo, and as he started with a pop culture and film reference, I'd like to do the same and just remind everyone of that movie in the early 2000s, Enemy of the State. Enemy of the State, good movie, where Will Smith, a simple US lawyer, had his identity stolen. And while that was a beaten-up Hollywood story, there is serious concern, it wasn't a documentary, it was a Hollywood film, but there is serious concern out in the community and tension in the community, as my colleague the Honourable Ruth Dyson mentioned, that now we are living in a much increased digital age, and people are very concerned about the worry of identity theft, and we all have received those emails from the ASB Bank or whatever bank you may be a customer of about asking for your details, and we know just to delete them. But unfortunately there are some people out there who do respond to them and find themselves having their bank accounts cleaned out. I just want to reiterate also at the beginning a theme that a number of my colleagues have made, and that is the journey of the electronic identity verification bill would have been much different if it had happened in the context of recent events around the security of information at a number of government departments, and they have been mentioned, and I will revisit them later, but I would imagine if this bill had gone through the select committee process, that there would have been a lot more opposition and scrutiny of the details of this bill, a lot more evidence, a lot more submissions than just the 12 that the Government Administration Select Committee received. And kudos to the Select Committee. Apparently they worked well to ensure that this legislation was improved and has arrived, and as Mr Okunvo mentioned, in a non-partisan fashion, made sure that the bill arrived before Parliament in a much better state than when it arrived at the first reading. Ruth Dyson did say there was some tension between the digital age and concern around privacy, but I think there's also a fair bit of concern in the community around the digital age and frustration amongst the public of having to repeatedly offer up, whether it be physically, their documentation around their identity. I know we've all probably had people in our electorate offices who are sick and tired of having to repeatedly supply, whether it be their address or their birth certificate or marriage certificate. So, as Trevor Mallard mentioned, this is something that has been rolled out to make sure that we can improve the efficiency and relieve some frustration in the community to streamline the process when we're dealing with the likes of births, deaths and marriages and the Department of Internal Affairs. Mr Chair, I do want to point to the bill and Part 1 and the Purpose Clause 3.1. The purpose of this Act is to facilitate secure interactions, particularly online interactions between individuals on the one hand and participating agencies on the other. And I just do want to focus in on those two words, secure interactions, and take stock of the recent events that have happened with the Ministry of Social Development and the kiosks that Keith Ing accessed and managed to download 7,000 documents from those kiosks that were publicly available to anyone who walked into a WINS office around the country. Now, for this iGovernment system to work, our public need absolute confidence that their basic details are going to be held securely within the departments concerned. And while Mr Okunvo did have a bit of a jibe, but I think it is absolutely appropriate for the opposition to point out that the government should take stock of what happened in those instances and look very closely as to the security of the information that is concerned here. Because when we've got a large ministry like the Ministry of Social Development having publicly available kiosks where 7,000 documents can be accessed by anyone off the street, and we're talking names of people who have committed suicide, invoices, medical records, you have to start questioning the capability of the government to manage information within our public service. And that is a fair question to ask, absolutely fair. And when you put that in context of other ministries that have come out and and absolutely and utterly and rightly so have confessed that they have had privacy breaches as well. I understand the Ministry of Justice came to the fore and said, look, we've had a potential breach as well. My colleague, Dr. David Clark, has talked about the 6,300 people or individuals. Consent, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Chris Farfoy.
My colleague Dr. David Clark has talked about the 6,300 individuals affected by a privacy breach with the Inland Revenue Department, and I think it's absolutely appropriate in the context of this bill that we support, and we hope that the government can bring in and get right that we ask the questions as the opposition to make sure the security of this information is going to be appropriate, because there is, as I said, massive concern out there in the community about the privacy of their personal information and identity theft. And I think the confidence of the public has been shaken by those misgivings from the Ministry of Social Development, and I think they are disappointed that this could happen to such a large extent. The nature of the information that was let out through those kiosks and the sheer number of the documents that have been accessed really did shake the confidence in the public about the ability of the government to protect this basic information. Mr. Chair, this legislation is a sign of the times. We're going to have more and more of this type of information as we are well and truly into the digital age, and as our lives change to more online transactions, we are going to have more and more legislation in this House to govern those transactions and how we interact online. So we need to get these kinds of things right. So that's why we are in this House standing well in support of this bill. We need to make sure we ask the appropriate questions so that the public out there who are going to be interacting with the Department of Internal Affairs and an important department like births, deaths and marriages and passports have absolute confidence that their information is being securely looked after. Identity theft is a major worry. We actually had a member of the former Parliament in here who many years ago committed what I believe was a case of identity theft. And so identity theft is not new, but I think it's the fact that we are living in an age where information can be much more easily accessed online. It is becoming much more pervasive in our community. So that's why I think that this bill is certainly apt. I think it's also important that the ability to opt out of the system is important, because while I think about 86% of New Zealanders are doing something online, not everyone is confident that they want to put all their details, whether they be bank account details, birth details, anything like that, online. So we need to make sure that there is the option, the ability for those who are not confident to transact on the internet to opt out and to be able to do things more traditionally, more old school, as you might say, to ensure that their needs can be looked after in an age where much more is going to be done online. We also need to think about those people who, because of their financial ability, cannot transact online. And I know there's certainly a lot of families in my community and the electorate of Mana who don't have the ability to have internet accessibility, who don't have a computer at home, and we're hoping that we can make that much more accessible for them. But until then, they do not have the ability to transact online with the likes of DIA. So we need to make sure that the ability is still there for them to do what they've traditionally done. Some may find that frustrating, but to do what they've traditionally done and be able to interact offline with the Department of Internal Affairs. And also, as my colleague Ruth Dyson said, as aged care spokesperson for the Labour Party, there are a lot of older people in New Zealand who, while maybe proficient online and may be able to do some simple things online, wouldn't be confident to be able to do the likes of the transactions, wouldn't be able to do the likes of transactions with the DIA that we are talking about here. So we need to make sure that they have the ability to do that. So just to conclude, Mr. Chair, we do support this bill. We are very concerned in the context of recent events around the privacy breaches that have happened under this government's watch with Work and Income, with the Accident Compensation Corporation. One that I haven't mentioned is the Education Department and NovaPay, which is obviously a big concern because those members over there will know that they've I've got teachers and their electorates that are very upset about privacy breaches and also their inability for them to get paid. So in that context, Mr Chair, we hope that the government does take heed of the warnings that this party has made in terms of making sure they get the security of information right and making sure they do that properly.
Mr. Chair.
Tim McIndoe.
I move that the question be now put.
The question is that the question be now put. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. We move now to the vote on part 1. The question is that part 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Members, we now come to the debate on part 2. This is clauses 8 to 53.